Aloha kako. Welcome to the hearing for the Committee on Agriculture and Food Systems. Today is March 22nd. Time is 10:01 a.m. and we are convening in room 325. Today we have with us Vice Chair Kahaloa, Rep. Cochran, Rep. Peruso, and Rep. Ward. Before we get started, I'm going to go over some brief housekeeping rules. There's a 2-minute time limit per testifier in order to allow as many testifiers to testify as possible. In the interest of time, if you have submitted testimony on time, our committee has received it. If you wish to present oral testimony, please summarize your written testimony. For testifiers attending over Zoom, please keep yourself muted and your video off while waiting to testify and after your testimony is completed. Zoom chat function will only allow you to chat with technical staff only. If you are disconnected unexpectedly, you may attempt to rejoin the meeting. If disconnected while presenting testimony, you may be allowed to continue if time permits. Please note the House is not responsible for any bad internet connections on the testifier's end. In the event of catastrophic network failure, it may be necessary to reschedule the hearing or schedule a meeting for decision making. In that case, an appropriate notice will be posted. Please refrain from profanity or uncivil behavior. Such behavior may be grounds for removal from hearing without the ability to rejoin. Lastly, if time permits, we will offer the opportunity for walk-in testimony. For those who would like to testify in person but did not sign up, please make sure to provide your contact information to the clerk sitting to the right against the wall. We will now begin our agenda, starting with SB 831 HD1, relating to the Department of Agriculture. First testifier we have is the Department of Ag.
Good morning, Chair Gates, committee members, Morris Hata, Deputy for the Department. We will stand on our written testimony in support. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next testifier we have is Hawaii Farm Bureau. In support, we have 2 more individuals in support. Is there anyone wishing to testify on SB 831 HD1? Okay, seeing none. Members, any questions? Rep. Ward.
Chair. Department of Agriculture, why did I assume you always had this right to ownership? I mean, why didn't you have this before? Why is it coming up now?
We have various means of acquiring, lands. So this, I think it enhances our ability to acquire lands for purposes of agriculture. We currently already have the ability to, for acquisition for our irrigation projects, ag enterprise programs. We also have eminent domain authority for irrigation infrastructure. But this bill enhances our ability to do it for pretty much any agricultural purpose.
So you got a big project in mind, or are you going to buy drones? Or
This is not our measure, so I'm not sure. I mean, we're glad that our powers are being expanded, so we can carry out the mission of protecting and increasing the productivity of our ag lands. But this is not project specific. It's just a power that's being granted to us to ensure that we can do that.
Good. It's pretty much a no-brainer, actually. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, we're going to move on to our next measure, SB 646, relating to ornamental ginger. First testifier we have is Department of Ag.
Morning, Chair Gates, committee members. Morris Hata again for the department, and the department is strongly in support of this measure. And we do have subject matter experts if there are any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next testifier we have is University of Hawaii.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair, Anya Wieczorek, Intern Dean for College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources, and University of Hawaii stands on its written testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. Next testifier we have is Hawaii Farm Bureau in support. We have a number of individuals and organizations also in support. Anyone else wishing to testify on SB 646, SD1? Seeing none. Members, any questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, we're going to move on to our next measure, SB 652, SD1, relating to agriculture. First testifier we have is Department of Ag.
Morning, Chair, committee members, Morris Hata once again. The department supports this measure. We've been battling the 2 line spittle bug for quite some time now, and we continue to support that effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Next testifier we have is the Attorney General.
Good morning, Chair Gates and Vice Chair Kahaloa, and members of the committee. Deputy Attorney General Jennifer Waihe'ipog on behalf of the Department of the Attorney General. We have submitted written testimony with comments about our concerns with the feral chicken, rooster, and pig pilot program, which was recently added to the bill without a clear link to the subject of the bill, which is agriculture. To avoid a constitutional concern, we recommend that the bill at least be revised to describe a link between feral chickens, roosters, and pigs and the subject of agriculture. And I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next testifier we have is DLNR.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Chelsea Arnott with Department of Land and Natural Resources and also program support for the Hawaiian Invasive Species Council. We support the measure for the two-line spittlebug management and the appropriation to Department of Agriculture, but also have concerns about the insertion of chickens and rooster management in this bill. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Next testifier we have is the Hawaii Farm Bureau. In support, we have Hawaii Cattlemen's Council.
Thank you, Chair Gates, Vice Chair Kahaloa, and members of the committee. I'm Nicole Galassi on behalf of the Hawaii Cattlemen's Council. We are in support of this measure, but as others have stated, we're concerned about the addition of the pilot program for feral chickens and pigs. We do think that this is a completely different issue, and we really support we really appreciate the support that we've gotten from the legislature on this two-line spittlebug issue to help the farmers and ranchers. But we hope that you can revert it back to a bill that can be supported all the way just for two-line spittlebug. Thank you.
Thank you. Noting that was the last testifier indicating they would be present. Anyone else wishing to testify on SB 652 SD1? Okay, seeing none members, any questions? Report.
Attorney General, please. How ironclad is your argument? I mean, this is really obvious it's not going to pass constitutional muster because of the subject and the contents, or is it, well, it may be one we can slip through, or unless nobody challenges it, or do you intend to challenge it if we pass it?
I can't speak to whether the department's going to challenge it if it gets passed. I would just say that we're advising to at least add some kind of factual, because it's maybe a factual thing, right? How this relates to agriculture. And right now, as we mentioned in our testimony, it's talking to things like how it affects it became a persistent nuisance in suburban and urban residential communities. They talk about how they're digging up plants and jeopardizing native plants and resources. And of course, first of all, feral chickens and pigs are not livestock, so they're not agriculture. So, and they also talk about how it has unsanitary conditions and smell and sound, and it also affects road hazards for drivers, but nothing is in here that supports that. For example, I think one of the examples we gave is even something to the effect of, like these animals destroy fruit crops in farms.
743 SD1 relating to coffee pest control. First testifier we have is Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bill. Sorry for my tardiness. Meeting with the governor went a little late. We'll stand on a written testimony in support.
Thank you. Department of Ag.
Good morning, Chair, committee members, Morris Santa once again. Yes, we will stand on our written testimony in support of this measure and just have some comments regarding pesticides and the pesticide regulatory framework. Thank you.
Thank you. Next testifier we have is Kananalani Ohana Farm. Are we having technical difficulties? Okay. We're going to take a quick recess to allow for our internet connection to be restored. Recess. Okay, reconvening our 10 a.m. agenda for the Committee on Agriculture. We had technical difficulties, and we will be starting with a testifier on SB 743 SD1, Kanalani Ohana Farms.
Aloha, Chair, committee members. Thank you for taking the testimony. My name is Kolauer Bandera, Kanalani Ohana Farms, Honaunau, Hawaii. I submitted written testimony, which I stand by, but I'd like to add a few commentaries and a correction. I apologize to have to add a correction. However, upon reviewing it, I recognized that my reference in the testimony to last year's piece of legislation that is very similar to this piece of legislation cites HB 1543, and it should cite dyslexia HB 1534 from 2022. So if you could make that correction in terms of your review, and if you look up that piece of legislation, you will recognize that all it did and all that I would like you to do as an amendment to this bill that you're considering is to add the words "and fertilizer" to the pesticide subsidy program, which I was one of the initiators of, working with Representative Lowen and last year with Capella. And I think my sense is that if you understand agriculture, you know that we have to start with healthy trees and healthy soil, and fertilizer is where we get going. And that pesticides, even though they can be helpful, are really more of a Band-Aid approach. And to wrap it up, last year was the worst coffee year that we've ever faced because of some of these pest and disease problems, and therefore none of the farmers can afford to invest in fertilizer inputs, which the trees need to fight off the pest problems they're having. So I don't think that this needs to be pursued as something that we can ignore. And I also don't think that the Department of Agriculture, which when I made this testimony last year said that they couldn't do it because they didn't have a fertilizer program or a soil program, needs to be ignored, but I think they need to be paid attention to and said, okay, let's figure out how to do that, and let's figure out and work together on how to achieve it. This isn't about more appropriations. This is the same appropriations. The money has not been getting spent fully. It's to allow the farmers to use the money as it's allocated. Thank you very much for your consideration, and thank you for supporting SB 743 in an amended form. Aloha.
Thank you for your testimony. Moving on to our next testifier, Synergistic Hawai'i Agriculture Council.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. Standing on Synergistic Hawaii's submitted testimony, I would like to add on that SHAC ran the first subsidy program back in 2014 to 2016, and we saw a decline of infection levels from 44% down to 6% in farms that took part in the subsidy. And this is a tremendous benefit to growers. It increases their income and increases the stability of coffee throughout the coffee belt. And in addition, I would like to add on to Kolauer's comment that there are a number of crop amendments that are not technically fungicides or pesticides, but they're biostimulants that reduce stress on the plant. You could call them fertilizers in the way that they act, but certainly if we included that language, would increase the health of the tree and also reduce pest and disease levels. So available for questions if you need. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Moving on to our next testifier, Hawaii Coffee Association.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, Chris Manfredi, Executive Director of Hawaii Coffee Association, testifying in support of SB 743 SD1. We submitted written testimony. We'll stand on that, but I just want to underscore a portion of it. Hawaii's coffee farmers have the highest cost of production anywhere, particularly recent labor shortages, inflationary pressures. Cost to manage these compound threat layers caused by invasive species and economic forces are squeezing Hawaii's farmers more than ever before. This program has been a lifeline for Hawaii's producers. We still need to compete in a global market with counterparts across the globe who do not share many of our high costs. We ask you respectfully to pass SB 743 SD1. Thank you for hearing our testimony. We're available also for questions. Aloha.
Thank you for your testimony. Noting that was the last testifier indicating they'd be present for SB 743 SD1. Is there anyone else wishing to testify? Seeing none. Members' questions, starting with Rep. Peruso.
I have a quick question for Shaq.
Yes.
So just to clarify, you are saying that the term fertilizer would cover the soil support additions that you were describing in your mind?
Yes, it would. And the department currently has the ability to authorize the products that are used or not used. And I believe they could make a fair evaluation of what's beneficial.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, we're going to move on to our next measure, SB 744 SD1, starting with the Department of Agriculture.
Good morning, Chair, committee members. Once again for the department. The department will stand on its written testimony supporting the intent of this measure and offering comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Next testifier we have is DLNR.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Chelsea Arnott with Department of Land and Natural Resources and Program Support for the Hawaii Invasive Species Council. Apologies, I'm going to be reading a summary of my testimony just to make sure I'm covering all the points here. So the department provided comments on this measure. The Hawaii Invasive Species Council is administered through the Department of Land and Natural Resources and provides policy level direction and coordination amongst the state departments and implementation of the Hawaii Interagency Biosecurity Plan. The council was established in 2003 by the Hawaii Revised Statute 194, but still does not have administrative rules. We have drafted administrative rules that are currently being reviewed by our AG, but as we all well know, it takes some time before these rules come into action. We do recognize coffee leaf rust as a major pest to Hawaii's agricultural industry, but even once we have administrative rules, there is no direction in our statute that would direct funds appropriated to HISC to support the management of coffee leaf rust. One of the recommendations we can make is, in past conversations we've had last year when this bill was introduced, it's that it's a resource need, and these farmers need resources and funding to help manage this pest. So one recommendation could be appropriating funding to the lead agency, Hawaii Department of Agriculture, to help out the farmers with coffee leaf rust, and maybe even the subsidy bill that came before this. I'm available for questions. Mahalo.
Thank you for your testimony. Next testifier we have is Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Thank you to the Hawaii Farm Bureau for the testimony and support.
Thank you. We have a number of individuals and organizations testifying in support of this measure. Anyone else wishing to testify on SB 744 SD1? Seeing none, members, any questions? Seeing none, we're going to move on to our next measure, SB 1552 SD2, relating to invasive species. First testifier we have is Department of Ag.
Morning, Chair, committee members. Morris Santa for the department. Again, the department will stand on its testimony supporting this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Next testifier we have is DLNR.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Chelsea Arnott, Department of Land and Natural Resources, and Program Support for the Hawaii Invasive Species Council. We stand on our testimony in strong support of this measure, and I just wanted to take a few seconds to emphasize the need for this funding for the Hawaii, which would be appropriated through the HISC, but to the Hawaii Ant Lab, which is a project of the University of Hawaii Pacific Cooperative Studies Unit. They're the lead entity working on research for new management tools for invasive ants. That includes little fire ant. They also support on-the-ground ant management with the Island Invasive Species Committee, Hawaii Department of Agriculture, farmers, and communities. Without their work, we would have little fire ant established across the state at this point. But this program currently has no stable long-term funding. They receive funding from the Hawaii Invasive Species Council through a competitive process, and last year they lost some of their core funding and they had to furlough some of their staff. But with coordinated efforts, partners were able to find federal funds, and thank you to the state legislator last year, appropriated $500,000 to support the operating their costs. But this is non-recurring funding, so we're really supporting this bill and measure and the work of the Hawaii Ant Lab. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Next testifier we have is Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Thank you, Chair. The Hawaii Farm Bureau will stand on its written testimony in support.
Thank you. Next testifier we have is Casper Vanderwood.
Yes, good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. It's very rainy down here in Hilo, so we're expecting to see a lot of ants today. I'm here testifying in support of this bill. I've been working in the business, I guess, of minimising the impacts of little fire ants for almost 15 years here in Hawaii, and I have a small team of really top-class scientists that are working with me. We're the ones that are out in the field getting stung, trying to deal with this thing, trying to figure out how can we manage this problem with less money or less effort or better results or safer results. And it's unfortunate that at the moment we seem to be between sources of funding, and I would urge the committee to consider funding Hawaii Ant Lab into the future as being the main, I guess, the main team of people working to minimise the impacts of this species, not only to agriculture, but to people generally and also to the environment. I'm here for questions and I'm available for anything that might be required.
Thank you for your testimony. Noting that was the last testifier indicating they would be present, we do have a number of testifiers in support of this measure. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on SB 1552 SD2?
Chair, Suzanne Schreiner from SHAC requesting to testify.
Please.
We submitted written testimony, but we stand in strong support of this bill. As a coffee farmer who has little fire ants on our farm, I can tell you it's been vital to have HAL's support. They've come out and trained our Coffee Grower Association and been boots on the ground for us. And for our neighbor island friends, I just want to say that when you get these in a residential neighborhood and you find one of these buggers in your sheet in the middle of the night, it's not anything we want to see. We really need to keep these contained as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on SB 1552 SD2? Okay. Members, any questions? Report.
Department of Agriculture. We have a blank appropriation and we have intermittent funding. What should be the funding to win the battle? Not just fight the battle, but win it. This thing has been known since 2009, as we've done in other hearings. The ants are smarter than us because they're still around. How much do you need to fight this and get rid of it?
You know, I don't have the numbers for the optimal operational cost to sustain the ant lab, but as DLNR had noted, you know, the unstable source of funding has been a problem. So I don't have a number. Chelsea, do you
Does
have a
anyone
number?
have a number about what's sustainable to get rid of this thing?
Yeah.
I can reference what Hawaii Ant Lab gets in operating costs. It's about $750,000 a year. But as we're seeing this pest spread throughout the islands and starting to get a hold on Kauai, Maui, we're going to need, I would say double that to at least mitigate the impacts. Eradication is really hard for ant species like this, but we can actually mitigate the damage it has on the environment, agriculture, and on our communities if we can.
I was going to ask you, why are they not winning? And you said they can't win because of what?
Just historically, ant species are really challenging to eradicate. These ones are incredibly small. They're considered a tramp ant species, so they can move around on all kinds of different commodities without being seen and undetected. And a lot of times, especially right now, we're relying on public reports. And some of those reports are coming in once those populations are already established in those areas because they're starting to get bit, and that's when people report. So it's just really hard to catch these early on.
Why are you relying on only public reports?
Not only public reports, we actually do surveys. Hawaii Department of Agriculture, in conjunction with some of our island invasive species committees and Hawaii Ant Lab, do regular surveys at known hotspots and also at ports of entry to mitigate the spread of these ants across the state.
So when can we expect you're going to get rid of them? I don't hear that you actually have a plan that can actually happen. So if I ask you how much money you need to do that, you don't know that either.
I can't say that we'll be able to eradicate little fire ant from Hawaii confidently. But
The ant specialist is behind you. Chair,
I know, I moved it out of the
the
way
ant
so he
expert
can come up.
who knows that we are smarter than the ants, except they're outsmarting us so far.
Darcy Oishi, Hawaii Department of Agriculture, Acting Plant Industry Administrator. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair.
Give us an
and-
end game, sir.
End game is we don't have the technological capability right now that we can forecast when we can eradicate little fire ant or really any of the ant species once they become firmly established here in Hawaii. There is research that is ongoing that hopefully we can develop these new techniques that we need to get more skin in the game on that research, but it is far, we are not at a stage where I can stand here, Representative Ward, and tell you that we're going to be capable of eradication.
So the money is not really the issue, even though this is an appropriation to do it. Money is not, you said technology and other related things.
Money is needed to, the current request is actually for management of little fire ant infestations and to slow the spread. But eradication is beyond our capability at this point with the existing technology that we have deployable right now.
So it's Coqui Frogs 2.0.
Yes.
I mean, they're still alive. Okay, thank you. I would hope there'd be an end game. Otherwise, this will go on and on and on.
There's always an end game. We just need to, there's just new technologies that we need to be investing in to develop better
Technology to
solutions.
fight an ant, I find that ironic. We don't have technology to fight ants that you
Well-
can hardly barely even see.
Ants are very capable, and they've been farming and had air conditioning before we did, so.
Good show. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments, concerns, members? Seeing none, we're gonna move on to our last measure, SB 316, relating to dogs. First testifier we have is Hawaii Cattlemen's Council.
Nicole Galassi on behalf of the Hawaii Cattlemen's Council. We stand on our testimony and support. Mahalo.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify, SB 316? Seeing none. Members, any questions? Seeing none, we're gonna go into a quick recess for decision making. Recess. Reconvening our 10 a.m. agenda for the Committee on Agriculture for decision-making. First item we'll be taking up is SB 831 relating to the Department of Agriculture. Chair's recommendation is that we move this out as an HD1, defecting the date to June 30th, 2000. Any comments, questions, concerns? Seeing none. Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on SB 831, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Both Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Cochran.
Aye.
Representative Lowen.
Aye.
Representative Peruso.
Aye.
Representative Woodson.
Aye.
Representative Ward.
Aye.
Chair, your measure is adopted.
Thank you. Moving on to our next measure, SB 646, SD1, relating to ornamental ginger. Chair's recommendation is to move this out as an HD1, defecting the date to June 30, 3000. Any comments, questions, concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on SB 646, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, noting the presence of all members today. Anyone voting with reservations? Anyone voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members. Moving on to our next measure, SB 652, SD1, relating to agriculture. Chair's recommendation is to move this out as an HD1. We'll make some tech amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. We will take the AG's language regarding Section 1, Page 2, Line 17, Page 3, Line 6. And we'll defect the date to June 30th, 2000. Any comments, questions, concerns?
Chair, I have some reservations given what, rather obviously this was not constitutional, but are the things that you're putting in there going to do exactly as she said that is needed, so it's not going to be any more controversial?
Correct. In the the Attorney General's testimony, they specifically asked for these amendments to meet the germaneness of the legislation regarding to the title of agriculture.
I withdraw my reservation.
Okay. All right, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on SB 652, SD1, Chair recommends to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye, noting the presence of all members today. Anyone voting no? Anyone voting with reservations? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members. Moving on to our next measure, SB 743, SD1, relating to coffee pest control. Chair's recommendation is to move this out as an HD1. We'll make some tech amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. We will also be taking the Department of Agriculture's recommendations in their testimony. We will be also taking the recommendation from Kona coffee farmers to add fertilizers to the reference of pesticides and defect the date to June 30, 3000. Any comments, questions, concerns? Rep. Peruso.
Thank you for those amendments.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on SB 743, SD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. With everyone present here today, anyone voting with reservations? Anyone voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members. Moving on to our next measure, SB 744, SD1, relating to invasive species. Chair's recommendation is to move this out as an HD1, just defecting the date to June 30th, 3000. Any comments, questions, concerns? Seeing none. Vice Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Voting on SB 744, SD1, Chair's recommendation is to vote with pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Anyone voting with reservations?
Just with reservations, because I think that the comments about the need for more resources to be dedicated to this issue were salient, so.
Representative Peruso with reservations. Any other reservations? Any voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members. Moving on to our next measure, SB 1552, SD2, relating to invasive species. Chair's recommendation is to move this out as an HD1, defecting the date to June 30th, 3000. Any comments, questions, concerns? Seeing none. Vice Chair for the vote.
Mahalo, Chair. Voting on SB 1552, SD2, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Anyone voting with reservations? Anyone voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, members, last measure, SB 316, relating to dogs. Chair's recommendation is to move this out as an HD1, defecting the date to June 30th, 3000. Any comments, questions, concerns?
Chair.
Report.
Can I vote yes with frustration?
With reservations.
Okay. Well, no, just frustration. Every time we hear this kind of issue with the ants, I just get really frustrated.
Oh, we're relating to dogs.
Oh, to dogs.
Okay. Thank you for sharing your concerns. Anyone else? Comments, questions, concerns? Seeing none. Vice Chair for the vote.
Mahalo, Chair. Voting on SB 316, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Both Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Anyone voting with reservations today? Anyone voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members. I think you forgot Rep. Ward wanted frustration.
Oh, with,
Okay, with frustration.
yes, with
Okay.
frustrations
All right.
noted for Representative Ward. I will write in a new box.
All
Thank you,
right.
Chair.
Thank you, members. This hearing is adjourned. Aloha kako. Welcome to the joint hearing for the Committee on Agriculture and Food Systems and the Committee on Water and Land. Today is March 22nd, and the time is 11:12 a.m. We are convening in room 325. Today we have with us Vice Chair Kahaloa, Rep. Cochran, Rep. Russo, Rep. Woodson, and Rep. Ward.
Good morning. For the Waterline Committee, we have Vice Chair Poi Poi and Rep. Zuda.
Thank you. Before we get started, I'm going to go over some brief housekeeping rules. There's a 2-minute time limit per testifier in order to allow as many people to testify as possible. In the interest of time, if you have submitted testimony on time, our committee has received it. If you wish to present oral testimony, please summarize your written testimony. For testifiers attending over Zoom, please keep yourself muted and your video off while waiting to testify and after your testimony is completed. Zoom chat function will only allow you to chat with technical staff only. If you are disconnected unexpectedly, you may attempt to rejoin the meeting. If disconnected while presenting testimony, you may be allowed to continue if time permits. Please note the House is not responsible for any bad internet connection on the testifier's end. In the event of catastrophic network failure, it may be necessary to reschedule the hearing or schedule a meeting for decision making. In that case, an appropriate notice will be posted. Please refrain from profanity or uncivil behavior. Such behavior will be grounds for removal from hearing without the ability to rejoin. Lastly, if time permits, we will offer the opportunity for walk-in testimony. For those who would like to testify in person but did not sign up, please make sure to provide your contact information to the clerk sitting to my right-hand side against the wall. We will now begin the hearing on the joint committees for Agriculture and Food Systems and Water and Land. First bill and only bill we have is SB 789 relating to farm dwellings. First testifier we have is Department of Ag.
Good morning, Chairs Gates and Ichiyama, members of the committee. Sharon Hurd, Department of Agriculture. The department respectfully offers comments on this bill that while we understand that there could be safety issues with unapproved farm dwellings, we want to point out that the purpose of some families staying there is because of ag theft, overseeing the crops, invasive species. So there is a positive side to having a farm dwelling on an ag lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Next testifier we have is Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Thank you, chairs, vice chairs, members of the committees. Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of Hawaii Farm Bureau. I'm sorry we have late testimony. We do have concerns with this measure. We actually oppose this measure. We're not sure what the intent of the measure is because currently ag zone lands are already protected by the Right to Farm Act. Chapter 165 does have protections. And when we're talking about specifically for this bill, it's for ag park lands. Those are agriculture zone lands. So we're not talking about private lands or other lands that may have concerns. Department of Agriculture already has a policy or procedures in place that will help determine the legitimacy of the dwelling. Essentially, it's a no before you get a yes. You do have to go to the board. So I think the bill is asking for some things that, again, getting input from adjacent landowners. That's not currently what's required, but the request does have to go through the Board of Agriculture. And then finally, the bill also is going to restrict, I believe, any future dwellings. Again, this is for agricultural park lands that the state owns that are in ag districts. That's a disincentive. You heard the chair talk about one of the reasons why we want to allow dwellings on farmlands. Again, security, ag crimes, ag theft, ag vandalism, theft of crops, theft of equipment, vandalism of equipment. Having a farmer live on their lands is a plus. There are protections in place. So again, we do have concerns with this measure. Thank you for allowing me to testify. We'll make sure the committees get our written testimony, and our apologies for not submitting on time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next testifier we have is Nancy Jones.
Good morning, Chair Gates, Chair Ichiyama, Vice Chair Kahaloa. Sorry for my typo on your last name, Vice Chair Poi Poi and committee members. Some information on this bill came to our attention yesterday afternoon. And so if we can change the language of the bill, page 2, line 14, and instead of, forever prohibiting farm dwelling construction effective January 1st, 2024, we'd like to insert the language without the express approval of the Board of Agriculture to make that more specific. Evidently, there's some residential-only construction going on ag land in Maui County, which precipitated this bill, and which isn't right to begin with. I mean, there are supposed to be protections in place by the Board of Agriculture prohibiting construction of farm dwellings without their approval. When you apply for an agricultural lease, it's understood, or you should, as a potential lessee, understand this. So, and for all of the reasons cited by the Hawaii Farm Bureau and the Board of Agriculture Chair, Department of Agriculture Chair, there really needs to be farm dwellings on farm properties for a whole host of reasons, to protect against agricultural theft and to safeguard crops, to safeguard crops in the event of wildfires and flooding and the host of other issues that affect farmers trying to grow a crop in the state of Hawaii. But if we can insert that language without the express approval of the Board of Agriculture, I think that would add the protections for farmers wanting to build farm dwellings, and it would satisfy the intent of the bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have an additional 2 individuals in opposition to this measure. Anyone else wishing to testify on SB 789? Please state your name for the record.
Aloha, Akayaka, Chair, Vice Chair, and the committee's Angela Melody Young testifying to provide comments. So one thing that, when it comes to government provisions, the government should provide equity. And in regards to the farm dwellings, it's being prohibited on ag lands. And there are a lot of situations where the farm dwellings are necessary, like the previous testifiers have stated. Because the farmers produce for our state, for the economy, there should be considerations that although there were complaints, that there should be a closer examination of the complaints and to address the complaints and not just prohibit an activity, right? Because it looks like from the research that this measure is resulting from complaints. So there are better ways to address complaints than to just absolutely prohibit an activity, because then you are creating an inequitable situation. And so I would like to point to an example from the City Council, Bill 10, Land Use Ordinance. They try to regulate and limit agricultural lands as it pertains to like weddings and bees. They try to limit how many people could be at a wedding, and also how many bees can be in an agricultural lot. And so in doing so, it's not considerate of the farmers. And so thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else wishing to testify on SB 789? Seeing none. Members, any questions? Report.
To the Department of Agriculture, please. Madam Chair, this obviously is a bill to get rid of the fake farms and people who are probably taking advantage of it by building houses and other sort of things. At least that's my impression. My question is this: does this cover private agricultural parks? Like Peter Savio just did a great thing for small farmers, and he said if you do the plantation housing in a centralized area, he's going to get approval. So this doesn't have anything to do with it. It's only the state or the county agriculture lots, correct?
I'm going to, I believe you're correct, but I'm going to turn around and ask my Ag Resource Management staff what they think.
Okay.
Brian Cloud, Department of Agriculture. As written, the bill only affects state egg parks, not even county.
And the Farm Bureau agrees with that, right? I saw his body language. Okay, terrific. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Could I get the administrator back up? Any other questions? But I'll cue you guys up. Okay. Hi, thank you for being here to take questions. My question regarding this measure is, can you give us kind of some background on what may cause this bill to be introduced, and do you guys see this measure being useful in addressing concerns brought up about farm dwellings being built without any farming occurring?
The department, the way it's currently applied, the department's de facto position on farm dwellings is no on egg park land. In order for that to change, the applicant of the, well, first has to be a lessee of the egg park, and then secondly, they would have to submit a request to build a farm dwelling to the Department of Ag, and it would go through a staff review that would look for issues like, does it really support the operation of the agricultural endeavor, or is it somebody who's trying to gentleman farm, build a mansion on ag land, whatnot. So if it doesn't pass a litmus test of supporting the operation, then it doesn't get recommended for approval. It has to have a connection to the farming activity.
And for farm dwellings, it's how, if they build a housing unit, can they charge people for rent for living in there, or is it
No.
primarily for ag workers?
It's either for the lessee of record, or if they have workers that they want to house on it, then they're not allowed to charge for a rent for that.
What happens if someone is found charging rent at these ag parks for residential purposes?
It would be issued a violation and a cease and desist, and if they continue to do so, they would get their lease revoked.
And how long does that usually take if you guys find somebody? What's the process like?
It's not a short process. You know, if we find it, you have to give the tenant the ability to remedy the situation. So there are steps that happen. So you have to give them so many days to cure the violation and whatnot, and then there's follow-up inspections on that after that.
Okay. I think that's all my questions. Members, any other questions? See none, we're gonna do a quick recess.
And then open the water line? Yeah.
Recess.
Okay, we are convening the 11:15 a.m. agenda, Committee on Waterland, Committee on Agriculture. Thank you, Chair Gates, for allowing us to have this hearing. First up, we have Senate Bill 1521 relating to sustainable land use. Testimony from DLNR.
Afternoon, morning. Good morning, Chair, committee members. I'm Michael Kane on behalf of the Department of Land and Natural Resources. We support this measure and look forward to working with OPSD in fulfilling our role in developing the plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Testimony from State Land Use Commission. In support, Department of Agriculture. Chair Hurd.
Chairs Gates Ichiyama, Senate Bill 1521. The department has summarized the major portions of the measure and provides comments. We stand by our written testimony as submitted.
Thank you. Office of Planning and Sustainable Development.
David Kobayashi on behalf of the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development. The Office of Planning and Sustainable Development strongly supports this measure and stands by written comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Hawaii Farmers Union United. In support. Next, we have testimony from Hawaiian Electric on Zoom.
Good morning, chairs, vice chairs, members of the committee.
We support this measure and stand on our written testimony, and I'll be here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Ulupono Initiative in support, and Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Thank you, chairs, members of the committees, Barambia Moto. On behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bill, will stand on the written testimony and support.
Thank you. That's everybody who signed up to testify on Senate Bill 1521. Is anyone else? Yep, Ms. Young.
Aloha, chairs, vice chairs, and the committees. Angela Melody Young testifying on behalf of CARES to provide comments. So the purpose of this act is to require the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development to develop an integrated land use study that incorporates the various studies to serve as a guide for planning and decision-making on the use of agriculture lands. We're just going to provide comments that we implore the legislature to consider less restrictive land use ordinances when going into the planning. So I'll point to the example that I was highlighting from before, the Land Use Ordinance Bill 10 from the City Council. So their intention was to encourage orderly development to protect public health, safety, and the welfare of the communities when addressing ag lands and the land use. But then there were inherent flaws and regulatory burdens that were being imposed by limiting a lot of the farm productions and their activities. Again, like the weddings, the bees, what they can or cannot do. And so it seemed arbitrary and not derived from metrics and quantifiable data, and the regulatory burdens limited the entrepreneurial, economic, and agricultural potential of the businesses and farms. And therefore, we were hesitant to support it, but then we just wanted to implore the legislature to consider less restrictive parameters and more equitable parameters. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Anyone else would like to offer testimony on Senate Bill 1521? Seeing none, members, any questions? Rep. Russo.
I have a question for OPSD. So in Ulupona's testimony, they asked that we revert the language back to that of a plan rather than a study. And I was wondering, for the sake of your office, what kinds of implications would that have?
I'm not sure at this time. I need to get back to you. I'm sorry.
Okay. So I have a follow-up question. Sure. And it might be rhetorical, like you might not be able to answer it, but I am really concerned about the political implications of an integrated land use anything, because there's so much power bound up in land use. And I would ask, and maybe you are able to answer, and maybe you need to consider an answer and get back to me, but I would ask, like, how do you intend to put guardrails around your process so that it is not unduly influenced by those who are the most powerful?
That is a very good question, and I would like to get back to you. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
Members, any other questions on this measure? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move to the last bill on the agenda, Senate Bill 287. This is relating to agricultural districts. And first, we have OPSD.
Good morning, chairs and vice chairs, members of the committees. My name is Katia Balaciana with the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development. We stand on our testimony in support of the bill.
Thank you. Department of the Attorney General.
Good morning, Deputy Attorney General Brian Yee on behalf of the Department of the Attorney General. We have some technical comments about this bill. The first and probably most important involves the phrase subdivision of land on page 3, line 15. Subdivision commonly refers to a particular county process, which can be fairly lengthy and exhaustive, which divides a parcel of land into multiple units. A CPR, which this bill is amending, involves a division of ownership of the land into multiple owners. It is not approved by the county in its normal process. This bill, as currently phrased, requires the subdivision approval prior to the CPR. it may mean, you might have been meaning to simply require county approval of the CPR prior to its effective subdivision or prior to its effective sale. And therefore, we have recommended language to that effect. We also note that there is an amendment on 514B-33A, which deals with an additional requirement to be added to the condominium map. And we recommend that it be inserted as a new subsection B instead of added to A, because A lists the contents of the condominium map, and what you've done is not add to the contents of the map, it's simply an additional requirement in addition to the map. So that should be a separate requirement. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Yee. Next, we have Department of Agriculture.
Chairs, Vice Chairs, members of the committee, Sharon Hurd, Department of Agriculture. The department supports this measure, and we are concerned about the way the ongoing condominium property regime affects agricultural land values. But otherwise, we do defer to the Office of Planning, Office of Attorney General, and the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs for their input. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hurd. Let's see, Real Estate Commission.
Good morning. Good morning. Chair Chichiam and Gates and members of the committee. My name is Nathan Choi, representing DCCA on the commission. Commissioner opposes this bill, but we will stand our testimony and be available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Then finally, Hawaii Farmers Union United in support. Oh, let's see. Yep. I think that's it. Let's see, is anyone else who would like to offer testimony on Senate Bill 287? Okay, seeing none, members, any questions? Okay, Rep. Ward?
The last testimony. Sorry, it was a bit muffled. I didn't.
Real Estate Commission.
Oh, the Real Estate Commission. Could you go back? What were the reasons why you opposed it? Or if you said it, I didn't hear it or read it.
Oh, sorry. Our testimony notes that there's existing statutes within 514B that the county already has say and review in the process.
So this would be redundant then, you're saying?
Yes. The proposal is redundant. It may cause confusion, as the AG has noted. And again, the county already grants approval during several instances on agricultural under 205-4.6.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, members. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we are going to recess for decision making. Recess.
Reconvening our committee joint hearing on the Committee on Agriculture and Food Systems and the Committee on Water and Land for our 11:10 a.m. agenda. We have decision-making on SB 789. Chair's recommendation on this measure is that we defer this measure for further work. I think the testimony indicated there are a lot of concerns for our farmers not being able to deter agricultural theft, vandalism, arson, and crop damage. We understand that the concerns of individuals living on ag parks but not actually using it for agricultural purposes is an issue that we want to see addressed, but we think that this measure needs more work to get that job done. And you know, we already know that our ag industry already faces hurdles in making their bottom line work and using ag lands for ag purposes. So with that being said, this measure will be deferred until further notice.
And Waterline Committee made same recommendation. So we'll move into the
Okay,
11:15
so we're
a.m.
gonna adjourn this
Oh, yeah.
hearing, and we will pick back up with chairs. Okay, adjourn.
Okay, we're on the 11:50 a.m. agenda, Committee on Water, Land, and Agriculture and Food Systems. Senate Bill 1521 relating to sustainable land use. Recommendation is to pass out a House Draft 1, defecting the date to June 30th, 3000. We're also going to blank out the amounts and put them into the committee report. Waterland Committee members, any questions, comments? Okay, Vice Chair.
Voting on SB 1521 SD2 with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Chen. Representative Ganaden.
Aye.
Representative Hashem.
Aye.
Representative Morikawa. Representative Takayama.
Aye.
Representative Souza.
Thank you, members.
Committee on Agriculture and Food Systems, same recommendation. Vice Chair for the vote.
Oh, Rep. Peruso has a.
Oh, Rep. Peruso, you have comments? Okay, go ahead.
So while I very much support this measure in the abstract, I am concerned about the process as it's outlined in the measure and do have deep concerns about the political implications and the guardrails that don't seem to be present. So I'm going to be voting with reservations.
Thank you. Rep. Ward?
No, I was just pointing out to her.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Colleague recognized by you, sir.
All right. With no further questions, comments, or concerns, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on SB 1521 SD2, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Cochran.
Aye.
Representative Lowen excused. Representative Peruso with reservations. Representative Woodson.
Aye.
Representative Ward.
Aye.
Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members.
Okay, last bill, Senate Bill 287 relating to agricultural districts. Recommendation is to pass a House Draft 1. We're going to take the recommendations from the Attorney General and their testimony, defect the date June 30th, 3000, as well as technical non-substantive amendments. Waterland Committee members, any questions? Okay, Vice Chair, House Draft 1.
Voting on SB 287 SD1 with amendments, noting all members as present. Are there any noes or reservations? Seeing none, recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members.
Okay, Committee on Agriculture and Food Systems, same recommendation. Any comments, questions, concerns? Rep. Ward?
Chair, question. How will the Attorney General's redundancy issue be taken up as the amendment?
So it will address the concerns that the Real Estate Commission brought up in their testimony.
Yeah, which it says it's redundant. I mean, I was going to do reservations because, you know, government generally gets bigger and bigger, and if it's redundant, it's not very productive. So if that means it's going to be modified to where it doesn't have to be done, I'm not sure how do you modify something that's already given a redundancy and you're going to put a redundancy on without killing the bill. Maybe that's where my confusion is.
I think it's clarifying the intent of the bill, which is to protect agricultural lands. And so I think when it comes to protecting ag lands and making sure we have enough local food production, that's and maybe deserves a second look.
And the committee report will reflect what the redundancy from the commission is saying. I think that's really the key, just the R word in there is very, very important.
Thank you, Rep. Ward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns, members? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Mahalo, Chair. Voting on SB 287, SD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, noting the presence of all members except for the excused absence of Representative Lowen. Anyone voting with reservations? Anyone voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. We're adjourned.